Hello everybody and Happy New Year. Welcome back to Cracking the Zodiac. This is going to be part 4. Wanted to start out by showing some photographs of some of the Zodiac victims. I went back and tried to find some ones you don't see too often. Here's one of Darlene Ferrin at her high school graduation. Here's one of Paul Stine you don't see too often, and another one, it's actually Paul Stine's prom picture. And here's another one I really like, a Cecilia Shepard. Here's a real early one of Zodiac victim David Faraday. And here's another one of Betty Lou Jensen, which was, of course, a victim at the Lake Herman Road shooting. It always really brings this case home when you see, shots from the victims' lives like that, and they were taken so young. You can see how young they all are in those photos. It's always so sad. Here's another picture of a very similar wristwatch to what Arthur Lee Allen owned. It's the Zodiac Seawolf model. And again, that one is really primarily targeted towards skin divers, which Arthur Lee Allen was. So it wasn't a big surprise that his mother bought him that watch for Christmas in 1967. And that's, against the story of Don Cheney, which said he got that watch for Christmas in 1968. Arthur Lee Allen's younger brother Ron, definitely said that they got that watch in 1967. Ron actually got an identical one that his brother got, the same Zodiac model Seawolf wristwatch. So it's really important to know that the Zodiac, in all likelihood, did take his name from that watch, because it does incorporate the name Zodiac and the cross circle logo. I know you can find that in some things involving astrology and stuff, but it's just far more likely it came from the watch. And what I believe, I think it came from Arthur Lee Allen's wristwatch. I think that him and Don Cheney sat around one day talking about possibly killing people under the guise of a book, and at some point that turned real. That's really what I believe. That's kind of what my book talks about. And you have to go back to the fact that on October 6, I believe, 1969, Arthur Lee Allen was questioned by police in regards to the Lake Berryessa attacks that happened on September 27th of 1969. You have to think to yourself, why was he considered a suspect so early on? Remember, this is 20, 30 years before you've heard of other suspects like Ross Sullivan or Richard Gaikowski. This is in the early days when this stuff actually happened in the area. So back then is when you're a lot closer to actually finding out who the real Zodiac was. Not 20, 30 years later when a new suspect comes along and people start layering on them and try to find anything that they can connect them to these crimes. Remember, Arthur Lee Allen was questioned on October 6th of 1969 by the Vallejo police. That is something that people really need to hone in on. Why was he questioned so early on? Yes, he had he got fired from his teaching job at Valley Springs for inappropriate touching of a student. This is before he ever went to prison for child molestation at Atascadero. That was years later after this questioning. You have to wonder, why was he questioned so early on? It's my belief that it was a tip from possibly the real Zodiac to already hedge his bet against Allen is a fallback position. Allen being a patsy, or maybe he did have something to do with the attacks, but I don't believe he was the primary attacker. I think it was Don. Don far better fits the physical descriptions. He's stocky. Officer Falk at the Presidio attack, when Paul Stine was shot, used the word barrel-chested. Arthur Lee Allen is definitely an overweight guy. He's a big guy, but you would not describe him as barrel-chested. Look at the photograph of Don, and that is your definition of barrel-chested. Other victims said he was stocky. The heights were somewhere around 5'8" up to like 5'11". He's the only person that fits the physical descriptions that close. And another thing I reveal in my book is that Don Cheney was highly adept at working with leather and sewing. So my whole angle always came from the Lake Berryessa attack. That's the one that we have the most information from, mainly due to Brian Hartnell surviving that attack and being a very articulate guy. Later became a probate attorney, very smart person. He engaged the Zodiac in conversation. That's why we have so many details about him, including the costume he wore. And Brian was adamant about the fact that this thing wasn't just slapped together. It was made with care. And that's Brian's actual words. He said the Zodiac logo on it wasn't just painted on. It looked like it was sewn on, and it was symmetrical. And he kept saying the quality was there. You know, this isn't something that a person would just take down to their local seamstress and say, hey, can you make my Zodiac outfit? This person knew how to sew. And that comes out in the criminal profile, too, of Korsgaard's book that I cite in my book as far as a description. You know, this is somebody that definitely had sewing abilities. Well, Don Cheney had sewing abilities. One of his specialties was making leather sheaths for knives. He was highly adept at knives. He even had a preference for the kind of knives that he liked. He was an avid big game hunter, too. That's something a lot of people don't know about him. He did a lot of hunting and used a lot of knives, gutting animals, cleaning animals. He was highly adept at it and highly adept at sharpening knives and making leather sheaths. If you can remember, Hartnell said that the actual knife he was attacked with looked, and he used this word, homemade. You know, it was a foot-long blade and had a sheath with it. Most foot-long knives don't come with sheaths. That's usually a custom-made item. I think Brian said it was possibly made of wood. Probably wasn't. It was probably a certain kind of a darker leather that made it look like wood. So it's just something that you have to go back to. But why, again, was Arthur Lee Allen questioned so early on in this process of the Zodiac? Somebody must have tipped the police off. Not, as I will say and explains in my book, to have Arthur Lee Allen go all the way down for the crimes, but just enough of a hedge to keep this whole ruse of what they would call the Zodiac persona going. I do think there's only one attacker and the 4 canonical crimes. I do not think that the Riverside murder is really connected. I don't. I think it's possible the Zodiac picked up on it early on, possibly wrote the letters, but I think it's far more likely that Sherry Jo Bates' boyfriend at the time was probably that attacker, and I know a lot of people believe that too. I think the DNA was negative against that guy, and they came out later and said, you know, they couldn't do anything with it. But there was a lot of things that, you know, during questioning, he's the person that the police still in Riverside believe to this day was Sherry Jo Bates' attacker. Again, I think there is a possibility that Zodiac picked up on that crime and possibly wrote the letters. I don't know. I haven't dug into Riverside that deep, and I'm probably going to write a book about it. But that's definitely where I'm going with this case. Why Allen was questioned so early on. You have to wonder why. He was only not even a known child molester at that time. Didn't even go to jail for it. He just lost a job over it. He's never killed anybody. He's definitely a weird guy, but why was he questioned? Were they questioning everybody around a certain age in all of Vallejo? It's still a pretty big town back then. Why, again, was he questioned so early is where I'm going. Another interesting thing that came out of the Lake Berryessa attack was they found a green bottle there near the attack site. I have a photo of it above, the one in the plastic bag, as they took it in for evidence with fingerprints. They don't know if that came from the Zodiac or not, of course, but it, possibly could have. Brian Hartnell recalled how the Zodiac seemed really nervous when he was about to perpetrate the attack on them, and I thought it was interesting that Don Cheney's favorite beer is Olympia, and one of the styles that the beer bottle would come in for Olympia was a green bottle, which I'll show there. So I never heard what exactly that bottle was, but it's definitely a smaller looking green bottle that was recovered from Lake Berryessa. I also want to point out, of course, that there's other things that heavily pointed on, as we know that Arthur Lee Allen's handwriting never matched up to the Zodiac. I did find a sample of at least one letter that did from Arthur Lee Allen, but Don's handwriting is a spot-on match from what we have. I mean, the letter that Don Cheney wrote to Tom Voigt, I think it was in 2003, was so similar to the Zodiac's handwriting that it prompted the police to get a DNA sample from Don, which turned out to be negative, but I think everybody knows the whole story behind the DNA with the Zodiac. What they have is really weak, and they can't even guarantee that it came from the Zodiac because it came from the outside of one of the 1969 letter stamps. Vallejo has some DNA that they were trying to get extrapolated, but they were never able to make a profile out of it. They announced, I think, a couple of years ago that they were attempting to do that, but they never had another announcement since, so assuming that profile was never built. But if you can look at this handwriting sample I have up here, you can see the M from Don in the letter he wrote to Tom, and then the M from the Zodiac's the Paul Stein letter, one of the letters that came with a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt. So I'm pretty sure that letter is not in question like some of the Zodiac correspondence is. And to start summing things up, remember, there's only one person that ever failed a polygraph test in regards to the Zodiac case. That person's name was Donald Lee Cheney. Of course, when they were going to take that test, he got incredibly drunk the day before as to be so hungover on the day of the test it had to be rescheduled. And when it was retaken, it was still inconclusive. Arthur Lee Allen was given a polygraph test while he was a patient at Atascadero Hospital, and he did pass that test. From what I read, it was a long 8-hour test. Could he have possibly been on some form of a tranquilizer or something like a lot of the patients were that maybe helped him pass that test? It's possible. It's unlikely, but it's possible. So my main point is only one person's ever failed a polygraph test in regards to the Zodiac case, and that was Donald Lee Cheney. You see where I'm going. Please check out my book. Obviously, there's a lot more in there, and I'll have another video coming out soon. Thanks for watching.